Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first episode of Top Rope Takes. I'm one of your co-hosts. My name is Jason Marcus, along with Willie the Thrill here. Willie, it is good to be here. I'm very excited for this journey. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited as well. I've been wanting to do a wrestling podcast for a while. I'm glad we both came together for top rope takes. Let's do
Top
this, man.
I'm excited. A little background about us. So Will and I are both lifelong wrestling fans. I started kind of watching at the beginning of, or to like the tail end of the Attitude Era, like probably like early 2004, 2005 ish, and I've been kind of a fan, lifelong fan ever since. I did a little bit of work in the industry as a videographer. Will, what do you do? I know you're actively involved in the industry right now.
Yeah, so I started watching a little later. I'm a bit younger, Jason. So I started watching around like 2010, fell in love with it. And right now I do some wrestling commentary over here on the East Coast for promotions like Remarkable Wrestling, Victory Pro Wrestling. And it's been an absolute blast through and through.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what bonds us together is our love for wrestling. And I think it's what makes us a little bit different is not only are we fans, but we do have that kind of little inside baseball knowledge into like how the industry works, having both actually worked in the independent industry. So, but this podcast is not going to be about our experience. You can find all that information on our personal account. We are here to talk about WWE, all elite wrestling, maybe even some impact wrestling, some New Japan, anything and everything that we find interesting. And hopefully you guys at home find interesting as well. Let's talk about it because we got a big week, Will. So let's just jump right into it. This upcoming weekend, Money in the Bank. It's not one of the big four pay-per-views, but it certainly felt like that for about a decade. It's one of those cards that when you see it on the calendar, you know, like they're going to have some big matches here. It's going to be pivotal to the rest of the calendar. How are you feeling overall, real quickly, about upcoming Money in the Bank?
I'm feeling really good about it. Again, Money in the Bank is one of my favorite shows of the year, right next to Royal Rumble. I just love like the chaos of it. All the Money in the Bank ladder matches are so entertaining to watch. And just for a brief moment, even if it is very brief, you can kind of fantasize about who can win the briefcase, what you can do with the briefcase. It is very much like a wrestling fan's dream in that sense. So I feel great about it. And I do love this card right here. It's nice and brief. We have Money in the Bank matches where really there's a lot of potential winners, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
potential possibilities. So very much looking forward to this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. I love Money in the Bank for those reasons that you just talked about because it is so unpredictable, especially in this year's card where you could see a logical path for any one of the participants winning the briefcase and what could do with it. So I love that. So let's talk about some of the big matches on the card. So we had Monday Night Raw last night. Probably the biggest match of the night was our main event. It was Drew McIntyre versus Sheamus versus Ilya Dragunov for the final spot in that men's Money in the Bank match. Drew McIntyre ends up getting the win here. Will, what were your initial thoughts on this main event?
Oh, I loved it. I love that it kind of harkened back to the WrestleMania 39 triple threat, whereas Drew versus Sheamus versus Gunther. You
Mm-hmm.
replace Gunther with Ilya Dragunov, who, of course, is a longtime rival of Gunther's. And I love how this match started, where it's just Drew and Sheamus facing off, and Ilya Dragunov's trying to get involved, a little brother action.
Yeah.
And then he just finally kicks Drew in the face. Love all that. I even love the callback midway through the match when it seemed like Sheamus had the win and Drew McIntyre pulls out Ilya Dragunov's legs to break up the pin.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of had that stare down similar to the way they did at WrestleMania 39. Of course, I thought Drew was the right winner here. Drew in this Money in the Bank ladder match, it does really make things interesting because I could easily see him winning, but it's also just as likely that we get my guy CM Punk coming in, swooping in, screwing him over once again, and then Drew has just reached his boiling point with CM Punk, and it will all, you know, come to a head at SummerSlam.
Yeah. Do you think that Drew is, we'll get into official predictions later, but there's so many viable winners in that men's Money in the Bank ladder match. Do you think Drew needs the briefcase? Do you think he will win it? Because obviously his angle with CM Punk is paramount to his story right now.
Yeah, I don't think Drew necessarily needs the Money in the Bank briefcase because Drew's one of those guys that you can insert
Yeah.
into a title match without explanation and it will make sense. So I think it makes more sense storyline wise for him to get screwed over again. But I also wouldn't be upset if he does have the Money in the Bank briefcase because again, the fact that he got cashed in on earlier this year, it would come full circle if he was able to cash in on Damian Priest again, or even just, or maybe even, Cody or
Yeah.
Gunther, whoever it may be. But for him to get that full circle moment of being cashed in on and then getting the briefcase, cashing in on someone else, who maybe even if Punk wins the title, Drew comes in, cashes in, gets his revenge there. There's a lot of options you can have with Drew having the briefcase. I just don't think it's necessary for him to have the briefcase like it may be for some of the other competitors in the match.
Right. No, I agree. I think when Money in the Bank is done correctly, it's put on a star who's up and coming, who needs that little bit of a boost up the card. Drew doesn't need that. Drew's a main event player, and he will be a main event player for the foreseeable future. I think one of the things that's going to be really interesting about this men's ladder match is there are so many people in it who have like side programs going on. So we could literally see like 3 to 4 non-participants get involved. We're talking about Drew and CM Punk. Does CM Punk get involved? LA Knight's in that match, and he's got a thing with going on with Logan Paul. Do we see Logan Paul get involved? There's a couple other who else in the match?
You
Carmelo
get
Hayes.
Jey Uso in the bloodline, maybe even.
Yeah. Jey Uso in the bloodline. Carmelo Hayes is in there, and then who are the other two?
Chad Gable could get Uncle Howdy'd.
He's gonna get, so that's there's so many things that could happen that are presumably going to set up matches for SummerSlam that I'm really excited for. I want to talk a little bit about Ilya Dragunov real quick before we move on. He's actually one of my new favorites. He's so intense and I love it. He's so like very much in the same line as like a Gunther or even a Sheamus or Drew. Like he just makes everything look so believable, even though like he's not the biggest guy in the world. Like he makes up for it in his intensity and his believability. He's one of my favorites. I thought that it was possible he could have won. I think out of the three of them, he was kind of fits that criteria of who needs this the most to like boost himself up the card. So I was kind of disappointed that he didn't win and that he's not going to be in the match, but I have full faith in Triple H in it to get Ilya to where he needs to go eventually.
Yeah, I don't think they have dropped the ball on Ilya. There's still plenty of time for Ilya Dragunov to rise up the card. And what's going to put him over the top is when he does have that match with Gunther on the main roster. Like once they clash and show everyone who hasn't seen their previous matches what they're all about, I mean, people are going to be like, oh, snap. Like Ilya's the real deal. Give him the title.
Early prediction, Gunther wins the world title at SummerSlam from who? I'll save that till later.
Yeah.
I think Gunther wins the world title at SummerSlam. Bash of Berlin. That's your main event. Gunther and Ilya Dragunov.
I love it. I love it. Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen. All right. So that was the main event. That was the whole Drew stuff. What were some other big things that happened this week on Raw you want to talk about?
I really want to talk about this Uncle Howdy stuff because it's been pretty big news each week to week. And I feel like there's two sides of the Uncle Howdy stuff that's been going on in Raw. There's the stuff that actually takes place in the ring, and then there's the VHS tapes that are being sent.
Yeah.
I'll touch on the in-ring stuff because I'm not too crazy about it yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still the spooky stuff, and that's not going to work for everyone. I totally understand that. I think the real tell will be when Uncle Howdy like starts interacting with wrestlers and we actually see him get physical. Right. That's when we can really make a judgment on that. So the spooky stuff may not be hitting as hard right now when it comes to the stuff we see in the ring. What does hit hard are these VHS tapes. I think these VHS tapes are very layered, and what it does, and something I really appreciate about the VHS tapes, it rewards the people who were following along with the QR codes because there's a lot of references in these VHS tapes to the QR codes, especially when talking about building the family, bringing them back to life. When Uncle Howdy keeps repeating, there you are. And then Bo and Uncle Howdy finally in this VHS tape coming together as one. Yeah. You see that this is the final transformation. They have merged into one. Bo Howdy has completely taken on Bo Dallas has taken on the Uncle Howdy persona. Bo Howdy. Maybe that's the combination there. But yeah, Uncle Howdy. I am taking I'm just captivated by this whole thing. And
Mhm.
I did like this suggestion. I heard this on another podcast. Shout out to Wrestle Talk. But I do like the idea of going down the members of the Wide Six and almost having a similar interview with each of them, but
Yep.
as their like regular uh wrestlers who they were before, like interviewing Dexter Loomis, why he
Yeah.
decided to join the group. Joe Gacy, why did he decide to join the Y6? And then, Eric Rowan, there's a lot of emotion behind that. You could get a really good interview out of that. I don't know if we'll see that based on what we saw this past week. It seems like it's just going to be a Bo Uncle Howdy thing, but it would be a nice touch to see why or how each of these members came to the decision to join Uncle Howdy in the message.
I think that it's very possible we're going to get that, and I would like that just because I think if they're being treated like baby faces. People want to cheer them, and I think if that's the direction you're going to go with them, you need to have a backstory for each one of them as to why they're in the group. So I do think that idea of having the other members having their own therapy session video is a great idea to really connect each of the members of the group individually. I did really like how in this most recent VHS they kind of established that like Bo Dallas and Uncle Howdy are the same person, but alter egos. Now, obviously, true wrestling fans who are really paying attention have known that for a year, almost 2 years. But I think that it was really nice for them to essentially make that connection for the casual fan who's like maybe tuning in for the first time. They're like, who is this guy? Like for them to almost blatantly say, like, hey, this is him. It's an alter ego. I thought that was a nice touch. One of the things Triple H has done really well since taking over has been long-term storytelling. You saw it with like the whole bloodline stuff, the whole Chad Gable Alpha Academy. Like it's so easy in this day and age to just want to hot shot stuff. But I think in the long run, this slow burn that he's doing with the Wyatt Six is going to pay off massively. Like he's going to get us connected to each of the members individually. We're going to know their motivations, why they're attacking certain people that they are. And eventually it will lead to some sort of match, but I'm in no rush to see it. I don't even need to see it at SummerSlam. I know it's probably going to be Gable versus Uncle Howdy, but do I need that? I don't know. I'm content with just seeing, them attacking Gable or whoever in a non-match form. I don't necessarily need to see them go one-on-one. I think that once you actually put them in the ring and it's go time, like you have to be very smart with how you book this group because that was the issue with Bray Wyatt and his whole clan was that he had all this great ideas, but the booking was terrible. So I really think I have more faith in Triple H to get it right, but I'm just excited to see how the story plays out and the slow burn of it all.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. I'm in no rush to see this transpire in the ring. When it came to Bray Wyatt and the Fiend stuff, the most captivating stuff about that whole era was the Firefly Funhouse vignettes. It wasn't even the stuff in the ring. I every time when that first Firefly Funhouse vignette debuted, it was like the thing I was looking forward to every week. I was like, what is he going to talk about? These are crazy. I need to see what happens next. But once they started doing Fiend matches and they rushed him into the Universal title picture, things kind of, got a little murky, so to speak. And I think Triple H has learned from that. I think this Wyatt Six thing will benefit from not having as much in ring exposure as maybe the Fiend did when he first debuted.
I think another good point about this group is because it is a faction and not just Uncle Howdy or Bo Dallas by himself, you can have Joe Gacy or and whatever we're calling these people, Joe Gacy and Dexter Loomis and Rowan and their new alter egos. You can have them in the ring first and kind of if someone needs to take a loss, make it those guys. But that way you can kind of keep Uncle Howdy / Bo Dallas like fresh and for the big matches where he's gonna win. Because like an Undertaker early in his career, like if that zombie Undertaker character in like 1990, 1991 lost, the gimmick was dead. And that's the same thing with Bo Dallas and Uncle Howdy here. He needs to be protected at all costs. His friends can lose, that's fine. but I think you need to hold off on having Uncle Howdy wrestle as scarcely as possible, just to keep that like that aura of like specialty around him.
100% agree there.
So I'm excited to see where that goes. I'm assuming they don't have a formal match in Money in the Bank. I'm expecting them to get involved in the Money in the Men's ladder match because Gable's there, but we'll see. Some other stuff on the Raw show. We have the angle with Dominic Mysterio and Liv Morgan and the Judgment Day and the LWO and all that going on. Will, what have been your thoughts on this whole Liv Morgan angle since Rhea's been gone?
I mean, it's horny. I'll tell you that. It's very horny.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw a few weeks ago, Liv, straddle Dom on top, like accidentally. And then this weekend, we got the opposite with Dom on top of Liv. I mean, a lot of this stuff is, it's definitely getting views. It's definitely getting engagement. So I can't argue it from that sense. But it does make me whinge a little bit every time Liv calls Dom Daddy Dom. And like, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But again, it seems to be working. I really am kind of at the point where, like, I get it with the Liv and Dom stuff. I'm waiting for Rhea to just come back at this point.
And again, it goes back to that whole slow burn thing. Like, I think,
yeah,
I don't know how significant, I don't know her timeline for that injury. So I don't know if she's going to be able to come back at SummerSlam. I would assume that's the goal, right? But yeah, I've been a huge fan of it. I think it's given Liv Morgan character depth and a complexity that she hasn't had since really ever debuting on the main roster. She's kind of just been like this really cute, fun blonde girl. But now we know she's a home wrecker. So that's great. I think it gives her something to sink her teeth into. I know people want to cheer her, but I think she's so good in this role as like the manipulative siren. I love it. I love everything they're doing. And I love how it's kind of also turning into Damian Priest kind of being like, am I the only one who sees what's going on here? How she's going to tear apart the group, and he's going to be the one who gets kicked out of it. I love it. I love everything about this angle.
Yeah, I even like. It's so funny. Like, Carlito's kind of been like an interesting addition to this group, but just the fact that he's like totally down with all this, he's just like, yeah, I mean, sure. Like, Liv sending you a nude, like that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah,
just like totally being one of the homies, but yeah, I just think for these weeks now, there is a point, like there is slow burn, but then there's also kind of like we're waiting for the next story note. Like, I feel like there's been a few weeks where it's like we can get to the point where Rhea comes back. And again, we don't know the timeline, but I don't think holding off on it for too long, like they got to be careful, like when they decide to bring back Rhea. I hope it's sooner than later, but I think if they wait too long, the storyline might get a little stale. So I hope they have stuff up their sleeve if they do have to wait for Rhea.
Yeah.
But right now it's kind of like while it's like a different thing going on each week, it's still like the same flavor of what's going on, which is just Liv being manipulative, Dom being like, oh, I don't know. Maybe should I hook up with Liv? Am I into this? I don't know. So I think we could get to the next part of the story sooner than later, hopefully, or maybe something happens at Money in the Bank that will drive the next part of the story forward.
I think one of my favorite parts about this whole angle is the suspension of disbelief that you have to have that, like, Rhea Ripley has a TV. She can see everything that's happening. Like, what do you mean you haven't talked to her? What do you mean she's fine with everything going on? Like, she clearly sees everything that the audience is watching, which I always thought was funny. Like, this whole concept of like that she's completely ignorant.
I did love that when Damian Priest was like, actually, I was on the phone with her and she's pissed right now.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, I'm excited to see what happens going forward. And let's get to that point.
Yeah, exactly. So they have so many angles they can go with it. I mean, they've already gotten Liv, kind of tangled up with the whole Finn Balor and JD McDonough situation, helping them win the tag titles. There's obviously some strife between Finn and Damian that I think Liv can continue to fan the flames of. And, just really like the whole overarching storyline with Liv is she's doing everything she can to take everything away from Rhea Ripley. And yes, that is Dom, but it's also destroying the Judgment Day. So I think that whole storyline of her getting involved in the Finn Damian stuff, I think is very possible. And I'm excited to see where it goes. Like I said, it's finally giving Liv Morgan a direction, and I have an idea of who she is now.
100%.
What are some other big storylines from this show? We had Jey Uso kick off the show, and he got interrupted by Chad Gable, who we've talked about, kind of setting up that Jay's probably one of the heavy favorites to win the Money in the Bank briefcase, and I think they kind of reinforce that by having him kick off the show with an epic entrance, by the way, through the crowd, which is awesome. I love these new camera shots we're doing. What do you think about Jey Uso?
I think Jey Uso, I mean, just from reading the stuff online, I feel like people are kind of down on Jey Uso just as a wrestler. It's very interesting to me because he's definitely a guy who gets the best reactions on each show. The
Mm-hmm.
entrance is electric. There are people who I know someone who went to Madison Square Garden Friday just so that they could see Jey Uso and do the yeet entrance. He was loving it. He said he was eating all over himself. Good for him. But people do love Jey Uso in the I feel like the casual audience really likes Jey Uso because he has been such a mainstay in WWE. He's been there for over a decade.
Yeah.
And finally he's getting that singles run, that singles push that some people have been clamoring for. And then other people are quick to say, well, he's not the best wrestler. Well, then you know what? Why doesn't your favorite wrestler get as over as Jey Uso? And
Right.
tell me that. And maybe, you know what? It is fair to say, like, again, he's part of the bloodline. It does give him a little boost. And, bookers will want to, especially Triple H, since he's booked the Bloodline storyline, he's going to want to continue that momentum and push Jey Uso. But I'm definitely not upset over the push that Jey Uso has gotten in his singles run. I do think this is a good opportunity for him to take the next step forward if he does win the Money in the Bank briefcase.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting having Jey Uso win the Money in the Bank briefcase, especially if a member of the Bloodline does eventually win a title in the next year, whether it's Solo, whether Roman wins it back, even The Rock. Could you imagine? Like,
Yeah.
The Rock wins, but then Jey Uso comes swooping in. Like,
Yep.
yeah, there's a lot of possibilities with Jey Uso as Mun Yeet in the Bank, as I think they're saying. I don't know
That's
what the
better
deal
than
is.
what did he call it? Yeet in the Bank. That's much better.
Yeah. So I'm not as mad about the Jey Uso push as some other people, but I get that he's not the best wrestler.
I did not get Jey Uso, and then I went to WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia, and everybody yeet all the time, and it's so annoying. But you can't help. But when his entrance music hits, like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna stand there with your hands in the pockets? Like, no, dude, you're it's all about crowd engagement, and he's got that. He's got the mic skills. He's got a great personality. Is he the best technical wrestler on the roster? No. But and we'll get into this later. That is the difference between a WWE superstar and an AEW professional wrestler. Jey Uso would not be able to make the 0 hour card of All Elite Wrestling. But it doesn't matter how good of a pro wrestler you are on a technical level in WWE. What matters is, can you get over with the crowd? Are they engaged with you? Are you selling tickets? Are you selling merch? That's all they care about. He checks every box there. He can do the fundamentals. I don't care that he's not the best wrestler in the world. He's fun when he's on my TV screen. And that's why I have no problem with him getting this push. My only criticism is, since WrestleMania ended and his feud with his brother Jimmy Uso kind of died, he hasn't really had a direction. He's kind of just been toiling around on Raw for what, 2 months, almost 3 months at this point. So he, I think, really needs this briefcase to give him a story. But that, even in that self, him winning the briefcase isn't going to be enough. Who is he? Who is his program with? Who is he? Who's actively going to be coming after Jey Uso? And so I agree he deserves a spot, but I'm excited to see where he goes because he needs something.
Yeah, I think there is going to be like this is kind of another holding out period because I do think this is all leading to, on the SmackDown side at least, is leading to an OG Bloodline versus Bloodline 2.0 storyline to come to head at War Games. Now that's way down the line, so they really do need to find a program for Jey Uso to kind of, maybe get him over, maybe get more people interested in Jey Uso before we reach that Bloodline versus Bloodline 2.0 storyline. I think ultimately Jey Uso, it's going to be tough for him because if you already have a lot of the audience having this perception that he's not the best wrestler, and there's a lot of people who are going to take over his spot. There could be a point where the Yeet stuff gets stale and
Yeah.
then people are more down on him. You have to keep the momentum going. Maybe he wins the briefcase and he has a feud with someone over the briefcase. But I don't even know who that program would necessarily be with, because it's
Everybody's
tough.
busy.
Yeah, everyone's busy. Everyone's got their own thing going. So maybe you do, like, do you do Seth Rollins? Like, I don't. It's interesting. Like, I'm
Yeah.
curious to see where it goes post Money in the Bank. Maybe the bloodline does screw him in Money in the Bank, and then maybe he requests a trade to SmackDown so he could take on the bloodline early. I don't know how they get to the bloodline versus bloodline 2.0 story, but they definitely need, if they don't have a plan for him to get involved immediately, then they have to find a program for him to tide him over until that point.
Yeah, I agree. And I think eventually he obviously is going to be part of this whole OG Bloodline versus Bloodline 2.0 story. So that's another reason why I could actually see him not winning the Money in the Bank briefcase, because he doesn't have something right now, but we know he's got something in the next 3-4 months or whatever. And so if he could have the briefcase during that time, and maybe that is an interesting element to whatever he's got going on. But like I said, my opinion, the person who has a briefcase is somebody that you need to elevate. And I think he's already kind of elevated. So we'll give our official predictions here in a moment. You did bring up something that I do want to talk about, and that is the return of Seth Rollins, which I kind of thought was early than I thought it was going to be. Like, I knew he was incredibly hurt at WrestleMania. He'd been talking about dealing with a back injury for years. Like, I kind of felt like this was a little bit rushed. I wasn't like dying to see Seth Rollins again. I love him. He's great. But like, this feels hot shotted. This feels like he just was dying to come back. Like, I don't know if he's 100% healthy, but what are your thoughts on this whole Seth Rollins return?
I mean, to me, when he returned and then immediately got inserted into the World Heavyweight Championship picture for Money in the Bank, I thought it was clear that this was just a way to get Damian Priest one more big win as World Heavyweight Champion before he eventually loses to Gunther. That might be a little spoiler for a prediction later on. But I just saw it more as like, yeah, you bring back Seth Rollins, you get him involved. I was stunned to see him back this early too. I did not think we were going to get him back until like maybe the SummerSlam buildup.
Yeah.
And I actually thought when he first came back, before they announced anything, I thought they're going to put him in the Money in the Bank ladder match, which I thought would have been interesting. But at the same time, I'm like, dude, this guy's crazy. Like, he's coming off a back injury and now he's going to be in a ladder match.
Yeah, taking ladder bumps? No.
I was like, man, this guy's nuts. But I do like this spot for him. I do think it's good timing for Damian Priest. I think, because who else would have Damian Priest really fought? I think Drew McIntyre's too tied up with the CM Punk thing. And I think if he were to wrestle anyone else, it would have kind of devalued the World Heavyweight Championship. Seth Rollins seemed like the perfect fit, where it's like, this is a main event guy to help elevate the World Heavyweight Championship and Damian Priest as World Heavyweight Champion.
I agree completely. I'm excited for the match. Anything else from this Raw you want to touch on before we go over the Money in the Bank card one last time?
I think we should just go over the Money in the Bank card, and then if there's anything through this Money in the Bank card that calls back to Raw, then we could discuss it.
Cool.
But I'm ready to predict this thing. Let's go.
All right, so let's just jump right into this Money in the Bank card. The first matchup on the list is actually something we haven't talked about yet. Sami Zayn defending the Intercontinental Championship against Braun Breaker. Braun, one of the hottest new young stars on the main roster, son of Rick Steiner of the Steiner brothers. Will, what's been your opinion on what's been going on with Sami and Braun?
Well, I love Braun Breaker, man. I really do. Like, you look at Braun Breaker and the things he's been doing the past few months, you can tell like he's going to be a star. He will be a main event at WrestleMania within the next 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. I think you could book that. And this is a great way. I think this Intercontinental Championship match is perfect for him, because I think the Intercontinental Championship can do for Braun Breaker similar to what it did for Gunther, where it kind of both elevates the title and the wrestler itself. And Sami Zayn, he's been a solid champion, but we kind of know why he's a champion. It's more of a transitional thing to give to a younger superstar who needs it more. And I think Sami Zayn is a great opponent for Braun Breaker, because he's such a great sell. And they really showed that in this past week on Raw, when they gave Braun Breaker 2 spears on him, and they also had Braun Breaker go into the steps when Sami
Yep.
Zayn ducked out of the way. I think there's going to be a lot of amazing spots. I think this is going to be an incredible matchup, but ultimately, this is Braun's match to win. And I think Braun Breaker's walking out with the Intercontinental Championship. What say you, Jason?
I completely agree. I like Braun Breaker a lot. I think between his family history, his use of the spear, his the dog motif that he's using, I feel like that's a main event waiting to happen with him and the old tribal chief. So I'm excited. I think this is exactly what you said. This is going to elevate Braun. He's going to hold this title for a long time. Official prediction: Braun Breaker defeats Sami Zayn to win the Intercontinental Championship. It's going to be a good match, but at the end, the last 5 minutes, I think Braun's going to just destroy him. This isn't going to be a roll-up victory. Braun is going to tear Sami in half, and then Sami can move on to other things.
That's right. I am curious. What do you think Sami Zayn would move on to after this Braun Breaker thing? Because I also wouldn't mind if like they really sell this and like Sami Zayn takes some time off before. Because I've also heard potentially him being involved in the Bloodline OG versus Bloodline 2.0 story.
Yeah.
So I think if they wanted to, they could not only have Braun Breaker win, but then maybe even after the match, like stretcher him out. Similar to how they did with Ricochet, maybe give Sami Zayn some time off. And then that way, if they do decide to insert him into the Bloodline OG storyline, he could get that nice big return pop.
I definitely think that Sami will be involved in the Bloodline OG versus Bloodline 2.0 storyline. I'm 99.99% confident that he's going to be a part of that. The only question is, how far away are we from that happening? Because I could see it going one of two ways. I love your idea of Braun absolutely destroying Sami and putting him on the shelf so he has that big return pomp later. I love that idea, but I also don't hate the idea of this leads to a trilogy of matches between the two, and it's just Braun and Sami continuing a storyline for the next 2 months until we're ready for whatever, So they could go either way with it, but the only thing I'm certain about is Braun Breaker is winning the IC title at Money in the Bank.
Yeah, you can lock that one up.
The next match we have on our card, no WWE Championship match. However, the champion Cody Rhodes is teaming with Randy Orton and Kevin Owens to take on the team of Tonga Loa, Tama Tonga, and Solo Sikoa. No Jacob Fatu in this match, if I'm correct.
I see. That's what I was going to ask you, because they did not make it clear what 3 members of the Bloodline we're going to see, and I think it would be a mistake not having Jacob Fatu involved in this match in some way, shape, or form, because he just debuted. People are eager to see him in the ring. I think it's going to be Solo, Jacob, and then you could have your pick between Tama Tonga or Tonga Loa. I think if they don't have Jacob Fatu involved in the 6-man, it's a bit of a misstep because people do want to see him. But if not, I trust them with whatever they're doing with Jacob Fatu. Yeah. He's another guy who's like, you clearly look at him, he's a star. Like he's going to be a mainstay in WWE for the next 5 to 10 years. God willing that there's no injuries or anything devastating happens. But either way, no matter what combination of the Bloodline we get, I do think the Bloodline's getting the win here. I think this is a great way to establish that Bloodline 2.0 is dominant. And what better way to do that than with picking up a win? Especially, I do think that Solo will pin Cody in this match to really put over the top that Solo is the next top contender for the WWE title.
I agree. So interesting note before we go into official predictions for that. On the match card, it says Cody, Randy, and Kevin Owens versus the Bloodline. It does not say who from the Bloodline. So I said it was Solo Sikoa. That's my speculation. We don't know for certain that he's going to be wrestling. Whoever they leave out, I mean, it could be a 4 versus 3, I guess, technically, but I just don't see that happening. Whoever they leave out is going to be intentional. I have enough faith in Triple H to know that he's already thought about why they're leaving out the person they're leaving out, because they've got bigger plans for it. So I'm not too worried about that. But I agree with what you said. Regardless of who the 3 are, assuming it's 3-on-3, Bloodline's going to win. The only wrinkle that I'm thinking about is they've also kind of been teasing Cody and Randy very, very subtly, but you kind of notice it. And obviously, there's a lot of history there. That's a program that is going to happen and probably on a big stage. But if we do get Cody versus Solo Sikoa at SummerSlam, does that mean Roman's are we so we're going to push off Roman even further? Like that means Roman isn't coming back at SummerSlam? Because if it's Roman and Solo at SummerSlam, then that opens the door for Cody Roman. But they also haven't had this big one-on-one match with Cody and Solo yet. So I'm not 100% certain what direction they're going to go with it here. I guess if I guess they're going to hold off on this whole Roman thing for a little bit longer than maybe I thought, because I kind of just initially thought he's going to be back for SummerSlam. I don't know. We'll see what can happen. But I agree with you. The Bloodline's going to win.
Yeah, I do think it will be Cody versus Solo, and I do think the Cody Randy thing is another slow burn thing. I think they know what they're doing with that. That's another one where you can, after SummerSlam, you can pull the trigger on it at any moment. You got yourself a pay-per-view match, Cody versus Randy.
Yeah.
You know what? We call ourselves Top Rope Takes. I'm gonna give you a top rope take here.
All right, let's do it. Real quick before you do it, I would just like to really appreciate this moment. This is the first top rope take on Top Rope Takes. And Willie the Thrill, it's all you, my friend. You have the floor.
Here we go. Well, it says Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, and Kevin Owens versus the Bloodline. You mentioned they didn't specify who. There's been rumors going around that there's a trademark for Tala Tonga, which was, if you know, is Hikuleo from New Japan.
Oh, interesting.
Could we see Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, and the debuting Tala Tonga as the three men who enter this match versus Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, and Kevin Owens? And if that's the case, I think this could be a pure squash. I think we could see utter dominance between these three men. You have the Enforcer, you have the new Tribal Chief, and now you have Tala Tonga, this 7-footer. And now you've really established that the Bloodline 2.0 is nothing to mess with. I think that's an interesting little thing. They didn't specify who. And then that way it makes more sense why you'd have Gorillas of Destiny, Tama Tonga, Tongaloa on the outside, and they can interfere as well.
Right. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I didn't even read anything about Hikuleo signing, so I guess it's still possible. They do like to keep things under wraps, but like the whole like Jacob Fatu signing, like we knew for a while. Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't hate it. I do think at a certain point, though, it starts to come a little like oversaturated. Like if you just start collecting Samoans like Infinity Stones, like how many people do you actually need in your group? You know, because like even the original Bloodline had Roman, Solo, and the Usos. I guess arguably you could put Sammy in there. So even at most, like that's 5, but Solo's going to be on the other side now. So like that's only 4, and you already have 4 guys here. So, yeah, I mean I don't hate it. I kind of personally feel like Hikuleo would just get lost in the shuffle. I think Jacob Fatu is clearly the biggest individual star on that side. Sorry, Solo. And then you already have your built-in tag team with God, which they haven't really called them that in WWE. I really don't expect them to, but I feel like they do need like a tag name. Like I guess they'll just call them the Bloodline. Yeah. I don't know, but listen, that is a top rope take if I've ever heard one. Fun fact, when I used to do work on the independent scene, I did actually get to meet Hikuleo, and he's actually very nice. So contrary to what you may see on television, he's a very nice guy. But either way, we agree the Bloodline are going to win this.
Yeah, I was just thinking that because I have heard the rumors of Tala Tonga being thrown around there. Right. I don't know if it was directly related to Hikuleo, but that's when people saw the trademark Tala Tonga. They're like, oh, I wonder who it could be. And of course, his affiliation with
being tall,
Tama Tonga and Tongaloa, and being tall.
They're like, what do we call this tall Samoan? What about tall?
So I do think like, you're right about him potentially getting lost in the shuffle. I think he would just be there to be like an intimidator. Like he would just be there to be a statue, to be like, look at these Samoans and who's this big guy? Like whatever. He wouldn't necessarily get over within the Bloodline, but maybe once that whole Bloodline 2.0 things like is done with in a
Yeah.
year or so, then you could break him out as like this big single star.
I'll tell you this. If WWE signs Hikuleo, Talatonga, whatever you want to call him, give me him versus Omos. Justice for Omos. Where is he? We
That
want
would be a
that big Nigerian bloke. I love that guy.
that would be a hell of a hoss fight,
Yeah.
and who knows how that would end.
Negative
Be a
two
hell of a
stars.
spectacle.
But
Yeah, 100%.
all right. So Bloodline's gonna win. We're not sure who's there, but we know Bloodline's gonna win. All right, moving on to our next match at Money in the Bank. We have the world heavyweight champion, Damian Priest, defending against the returning Seth Rollins. Again, a lot going on with Damian Priest right now. Not a ton going on with Seth Rollins. Will, let's start it off with you. Who you got?
Well, this is a point I wanted to bring up earlier when we were talking about Damian Priest versus Seth Rollins. When they first announced this match, I thought there was a very real possibility that Seth could be walking away with the World Heavyweight Championship.
Yeah.
I thought maybe this is why they're bringing him in now because, they want to get a big star to win the championship to then go up against Gunther and eventually have Gunther. It would put Gunther over more, I think, beating Seth Rollins than it would beating Damian Priest for the World Heavyweight Championship. But then they announced the stipulation where if Priest wins, Rollins cannot challenge for the title for as long as Priest is champion. But
Right.
if Rollins wins, Priest must leave the Judgment Day. And I just don't see the breakup of the Judgment Day happening just because Seth Rollins wins the title.
Right.
I think that would be kind of a lame way to break up the Judgment Day after like the past 6 months of tension that they've been going through, especially the past 2 months where Liv has been trying to blow this whole thing up. And then with Priest wins, Rollins never challenging for the title. That's not a big deal either because I think Priest is just going to lose it anyway. To whoever wins this match is going to lose to Gunther.
Right.
So really, if Priest wins and Rollins has to wait until Priest isn't champion, he's not going to have to wait long.
Yeah.
And I don't see Rollins challenging for the title again in between that time.
I think that this result is actually very close. Like I almost call it a coin flip. I really do think it could go either way because you already have the seeds being planted about Damian Priest leaving the Judgment Day anyway. So, if he loses, like it kind of just expedites that story. That's inevitably going to happen anyway. But on the whole, I do think that Damian Priest has earned one more big victory before SummerSlam. I think he's earned the right to main event SummerSlam. And Seth isn't somebody who needs the title. And also, another point is if Finn Balor was in the Money in the Bank ladder match, I think there could have been a story there. But he's not. So I think that actually bodes even better for Damian Priest as like potentially retaining the title. Officially, I am going Damian Priest is going to retain the title in a great match against Seth Rollins. Really built him up as champion, but down the line, he's got a feud with Finn Balor coming his way.
Yeah, I just think it would be a lame way for Priest to leave the Judgment Day if it wasn't on his own accord. It would be. Yeah. I think it's more effective if he decides, you know what, I'm making the decision. I'm going to be leaving the Judgment Day. I can't be dealing with you guys. You guys are too, caught up in this whole Liv Morgan thing. I need to separate myself. I need to be on my own. I think that would be more effective than him just being like, well, I lost, so I guess I can't be with you guys anymore.
Yeah. Either way, if Judgment Day is getting involved in this match, right?
I would think so. I would like to see just a nice, strong Damian Priest win on his own. Yeah. Because at Clash at the Castle, you had CM Punk interfere with there's a ref bump.
Yeah.
I feel like Damian Priest could benefit from getting a nice, clean win as a singles champion. So maybe Judgment Day tries to get involved, but Damian Priest sends him to the back. Yeah. I don't know how it happens, but I would prefer if Damian Priest just won this match clean on his own to establish himself as a strong champion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it will happen. All right, next we have the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. So in this one, we have, let's see here. We got for Io Sky, Chelsea Green, Lyra Valkyria. We also have
Tiffany Stratton,
and who else am I missing? I'm trying to look.
Naomi and Zoe Stark.
Okay, so interesting group here. I think Naomi's a good hand. veteran, no shot she's winning this. Zoe Stark, I don't is again good hand, younger, needs more time to develop. I don't think she's ready for this. Um, Io Sky won it last year, former world champion. She's got her own story with damage control that's coming up. She don't need this. I think I mean, Chelsea Green's fun. That'd be a fun story. I could see her as a spot of like, it looks like she's going to win, and then she gets knocked down by the eventual winner. I think there's one clear, obvious answer for you, right?
Yeah.
It's we're gonna have a pink Money in the Bank briefcase very soon with one Miss Center of the Universe, Tiffany Stratton. Come on down. I think this is the biggest slam dunk on the card. Tiffany Stratton is winning Money in the Bank, and she is going to be a massive superstar. I love Tiffany Stratton. She's such a good athlete. She's got the mic skills. She has her character down. She's gotten, huge reactions since coming on the main roster. She is a star, and it is just a matter of time. I don't think she holds on to this briefcase long. I don't think she's going to cash in that night. I could be wrong. We've seen it before. I just think the way Triple H has been booking things recently, I do think she'll hold on to it for a little bit, but they are not going to wait to pull the trigger on making her champion.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if she can cash it in on this card. There's no women's match to cash in on. So unless she drags a champion to the ring or calls out a champion.
That's true.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I do 100% agree. It is Tiffy time. Tiffany Stratton, this is her match to win. She is a star. Like, that's the thing. You could take any person off the street and just show them Tiffany Stratton. They will see that she's a star.
Yeah.
And she's proven that since she's gotten called up to the main roster. I look at this lineup and I see Naomi's name, and I can't help but think, like, she came back in January, and I just feel like they really dropped the ball on Naomi's return. Like, they really, like, it depends on how you feel about Naomi, but if you saw like the potential that she had when she was in TNA Impact, like, it does feel like they just signed her just so that she wouldn't be or like they would just be like, fans, shut up, like we signed Naomi, now will you be quiet about it? And instead of like, oh, we're gonna bring in Naomi and we have plans for her. She didn't get involved. She kind of wasn't involved in that tag situation with Jade and Bianca. They kind of stole the show.
She was the obvious third wheel.
Exactly. And there's just no believable path for her to become women's champion anytime soon. So I can't help but think I think she would actually benefit from going to NXT and maybe like trying to elevate some of those stars. Because really, I just don't see her as like a viable threat on the main roster at this moment. And I think she would get herself more over by going down to NXT and helping out some of those ladies.
I agree completely. I'd love that idea of her to go down to NXT. I would love to have been a fly on the wall in those negotiations between Naomi and Triple H, I assume. I don't think that when she re-signed with WWE, I would be shocked if part of those discussions were, I'm going to be world champion, right? I think she kind of knew what her role was when she came back. She's not jobbing out to anybody, right? She's just kind of floating in the middle. But realistically speaking, like, this is just the difference between what's important to some wrestlers and what's important to other wrestlers. She's with her husband, traveling the road together again. She's on TV almost every week for the bigger company. And she's probably getting paid significantly more to be a mid-carder than a champion in TNA. And with this whole WWE TNA relationship that we may or may not talk about, like, she can easily go back and win the world title.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Naomi is complaining at all about this. No. It just seems weird if you are WWE to bring in someone like Naomi and kind of just have her in the middle of the pack, especially after all of like the clamoring that people had for her to come back to WWE. I also think it doesn't help that I think she should have came back with Sasha if they were going to bring back Sasha, but since she came back on her own, it was It kind of felt like they really didn't have anything for her. But I agree with going back to the Money in the Bank ladder match. Tiffany Stratton could win. I think a dark horse in this match, if they have other plans for Tiffany, is Lyra Valkyria. She's
Mm-hmm.
been kind of dancing around that World Heavyweight Championship scene on Monday Night Raw, and she could be one of those more long-term Money in the Bank holders where you kind of build her up over time with the briefcase, and kind of that's another one where you could elevate a star by
Yeah.
giving her the briefcase. Tiffany Stratton, like, even though she is so new, she doesn't necessarily, like, if she doesn't win the briefcase, I don't think it's a big deal to
No,
her.
for sure.
Whereas if you give it to Lyra Valkyria, that is going to be a huge elevation for her on the main roster. And mentioning just real quick on Chelsea Green, I think Chelsea Green's going to steal the show on
Oh
this.
yeah.
I think she's going to have so many funny spots, so many great spots. She's such a creative mind. She is really like one of the biggest assets I think WWE has in their women's division. I anytime she's on the screen, I'm like hooked. I'm glued because she's either going to do something ridiculous, something funny. She's going to wear something, new and creative.
Yeah.
I really do enjoy Chelsea Green's presence on the main roster, and I can't wait to see what she does in Money in the Bank.
Yeah, I like Chelsea Green a lot. She's got a character that she knows what her character is. She's funny. She's got, comedic relief. So she's hitting on all cylinders. I don't think she's going to win a world title anytime soon. But, not everyone's world champion. All right. So that's our prediction for the women's Money in the Bank match. Oh, real quick. Lyra Valkyria, I personally don't get her. She's fine. But I think, like, again, she's somebody who doesn't, the briefcase would help her a lot. But also, she's going to win a fatal four-way number one contenders match and be in the world title picture anyway. I personally don't see it for her. She's yet to really like get over with me personally. I just don't see it. Tiffany though, slam dunk. All right, moving on to our last match on the card, men's Money in the Bank ladder match. We got a lot of big names in this one. We have Carmelo Hayes, LA Knight. We have Chad Gable, Drew McIntyre, and who else am I missing, Will?
Jey Uso
Jey Uso, yep.
and Andrade.
And Andrade. Okay. All right. So those are the six in the men's ladder match. Andrade, no. Sorry. No shot.
He's got to defend the Speed Championship. How is he going to do that and hold the Money in the Bank?
He's got other issues. He's got other problems he needs to worry about. Andrade, great wrestler. That's all I got on him. And then Chad Gable's got his stuff with Uncle Howdy, so I think he's tied up there. And, we still haven't really fully pulled off his whole Alpha Academy stuff with Otis and Maxine and Tozawa. So, he's out. Who else? Carmelo Hayes, I think, is a real potential to win. I think he fits the bill. I think Drew McIntyre's out because he's got enough going on with CM Punk, and like we had said earlier, he doesn't need the Money in the Bank briefcase. LA Knight, a real potential to win, but I do think that his stuff with Logan Paul is kind of taking the front right now. I think that's more important. And then we got Jey Uso, who's a great star, but not doing anything. So I think it's between those three. I think it's Carmelo, LA Knight, and Jey Uso. Tough one to say. My official prediction.
It's tough, isn't it?
It is
is
tough.
really tough.
I
still don't know who when I say my name, it's going to be, I'm making that decision in the moment because I'm still looking at, and you kind of wrote off Chad Gable. I could still see Chad Gable winning this thing. Like I could see like him, like maybe this is where like the Creed brothers come into play and maybe help out him winning the Money in the Bank briefcase. I think there is a lot of interesting stuff you could do with Chad Gable and the Money in the Bank briefcase. And then especially if he does continue to involve himself in the Uncle Howdy stuff, it is a possibility. So I'm still keeping that option open. I don't know. I'm not 100% committed to it, but it is another interesting Money in the Bank briefcase holder. That's what I love about this match is that even Andrade, like all of these guys have like interesting things they can do with the Money in the Bank briefcase going forward, especially involving their feuds. I do think, like you said with LA Knight, the Logan Paul stuff is the kind of the more prominent thing on WWE's mind. So I think LA Knight is going to get great reactions. I
Yeah.
think anytime he climbs up the ladder, people are going to be freaking out because they think he could win it. But I think that's all he's there for, is to just get people excited, fired up, for them maybe a heel to shove him out of the way, which is why I'm going to lock it in now. And this is a bold pick. I think Carmelo Hayes is walking out with the briefcase. I think it would be a big statement, especially because this is the Triple H era, the Paul Levesque era, if both Tiffany Stratton and Carmelo Hayes, the call ups, walked out with Money in the Bank briefcases.
I love it.
I think that's going to be the story.
I love that. I if so I'm torn a little bit right now because if I was booking the show, right, I think Carmelo Hayes is the best choice to win Money in the Bank. Um, I think he needs it to elevate himself on the card. He's great talent, future world champion, and also I think the other really big contender is Jey Uso. And I think Jay has this whole bloodline stuff on the horizon that I think is going to eat up his like summer, winter, fall, whatever. And I don't necessarily know if he needs the briefcase. However, the man's on the poster.
Yeah, exactly. That is huge. That is huge.
The man's on the poster. And also we are very confident Tiffany Stratton's going to win the women's. Typically, they like to have one face and one heel. If Tiffany's your heel, I think Jey Uso is going to win. So, as much as I would prefer Carmelo Hayes to win the Money in the Bank, what I think they're going to do, I think Jey Uso is winning Money in the Bank.
Yeah, I think Jey Uso is a close second and probably the more realistic option to win Money in the Bank. And I do think if he does have the Money in the Bank briefcase, I don't think it affects the bloodline storyline at all. In fact, I think it adds a little intrigue. Like if these guys are all like competing over who gets the next shot at the WWE Championship, and then at maybe post Bloodline versus Bloodline 2.0, if Solo wins the title, if Roman wins the title, then you still have Jey Uso lurking with the Money in the Bank. I think if Jey Uso does win, same with Carmelo, I think this is a long-term Money in the Bank briefcase holder. I don't think it's going to be anything soon. I think we'll get another long reign with the briefcase, similar to Damian Priest. We could even see another WrestleMania cash in. Who knows? But
I think 2 years in a row would be a lot.
2 years in a row would be a lot. But I do think whoever ends up winning, Jey Uso, Carmelo, anyone really. The only one I could see cashing in like immediately is Drew if he wins.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't see Drew winning. I think again CM Punk's gonna play a factor in this match. So I totally understand the Jey Uso pick. I'm gonna hold out hope for Carmelo Hayes, and then that will really elevate his status.
Listen, I'll be happy if I'm right, and I'll be happy if I'm wrong. Either way.
There you go.
All right, so that is Money in the Bank this Saturday night. One last thing in WWE going on. NXT Heatwave is going on the day before, I believe. I really don't have much to say about NXT these days. It's all right. I don't personally watch it that much. The only thing that I'm really invested in is I do think Trick Williams is a big star and is going to be huge once he gets called up to the main roster. Do you have anything or thoughts on NXT these days?
I do have thoughts on NXT in regards to their relationship, their working relationship with TNA.
Mm-hmm.
I think this has been such a one-sided like relationship so far, where NXT has gotten like the hottest superstar on TNA and Joe Hendry. They got their TNA Knockouts champion, Jordan Grace. And who does TNA get? Izzy Dame, Tatum Paxley, Charlie Dempsey. Like, they're not getting big name. I would love to see like an AJ Styles show up to TNA, like, because that would be a big deal for the TNA fans. It's not going to drive people away from WWE to TNA. I do think that TNA needs to get something in return for all of this promotion that they're giving WWE with all of their stars.
Yeah.
And I understand that you want to get eyes on TNA, but I don't think sending NXT people is going to bring people from WWE to TNA. And I don't know. I'm sure TNA wants these big stars like a AJ Styles or a Drew McIntyre or whoever, like former Impact guy they want to bring in, even LA Knight. So I don't know what the end game is, but I think if TNA doesn't get a big star, I think they might cut this relationship short very quickly because it's clearly going to be like a second developmental for WWE if they don't, get a fair deal in return.
At the same time, though, like WWE has the leverage here, and
Oh,
both sides
100%.
both
Yeah.
sides know it. So like, yeah, TNA isn't thrilled to be getting Tatum Paxley, but like, what are they gonna do? They're gonna go back to being TNA.
Exactly. Like they can't really be like, all right, I'm done with this. And then
Yeah.
like
So
they just don't get the NXT stars then. I just
no.
think it's like disingenuous on WWE side to be like, we have a working relationship with TNA, but we're gonna give
Yeah.
them the lowest of the low on our NXT
I agree with
roster.
your AJ Styles take. I think especially now that his program with Cody's over, he's not got a ton to do. I 100% could see him going back to TNA for a program. Just
Yeah,
to, get some eyes there.
make it happen, Triple H.
Make it
Let it
happen.
let us think this is a new era and don't make it seem like it's the previous era.
Right. All right, so that's WWE NXT Heatwave and Money in the Bank this weekend. There was one other big show happening in wrestling this week. This past Sunday, AEW held their annual Forbidden Door pay-per-view. Not a ton.
You weren't talking about Remarkable Chamber of Horrors?
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry, my bad. Two big events that are happening in wrestling this week.
No, but continue.
Yes, AEW held Forbidden Door, the third annual Forbidden Door. There were, what typical AEW fashion, there's a lot of really great professional wrestling on this card. But when AEW first started, I was the biggest AEW fan. I had merchandise. I was watching Being the Elite. I was going to live shows, Dynamites, pay-per-views. Like, I was gung-ho AEW because WWE under Vince McMahon was just such a dumpster fire. But I'm going to be honest. Since we've lost Cody Rhodes and CM Punk and Kenny Omega's been hurt and Hangman Page is off television, it is like Will Ospreay is my favorite wrestler in any company in the world. He's literally probably the only reason I'm still watching. I love Will and the wrestling is great, but like there's no stories going on right now. It's just matches. It's just these two are really guys are really great professional wrestlers. Figure out why you're fighting. The matches are driving story. It's not stories driving matches. And that, in my opinion, is just such a flawed way of booking this show. Because, like, why the hell was MJF fighting Hechicero other than it's a Forbidden Door pay-per-view? Like, if Forbidden Door is coming up on your calendar, start that story in advance so that it makes sense by the time the pay-per-view is coming along. Like, he was feuding with Roosh last week, and Roosh was nowhere to be seen. Like, what are we doing here? Again, it's fine. I watched it. I bought it. They got my money. But like, and even like my frustration with like the whole Will and Swerve, you just had, first off, Will Ospreay comes into your company and you're paying him like he's your champion, your main event guy. He's winning the world title soon. Why are you so desperate to just put a random freaking title on him that you take it off Roderick Strong? You could give him the international championship, a mid-card title. Like, what is the point of giving him a mid-card title when he's your main event guy for the future? Now that title's doing nothing. And literally the next day on Dynamite, they were like, oh yeah, he's going to be in the main event fighting for the world title. Then why did you have him win the mid-card title? It doesn't make any sense. He doesn't need it. And there's so much more they could have been doing with this story. Like, Swerve wins clean. Great. Swerve's a babyface or whatever. But now it's like, so are we just going to move on now? Like, there was no reason for me to now, I want to tune into Dynamite now to see what's going to happen next. It's like, no, Swerve won. Okay. And now I'm supposed to get excited about Will Ospreay versus Daniel Garcia? Like, who cares? There's no reason for me to tune in other than these matches are good matches from like a technique standpoint. But the whole AEW is missing the storytelling element. there's no reason other than it's going to be a 5-star match that I, as a fan, want to tune in. And I don't give a shit, sorry, that you're a good wrestler if I don't connect to your character. Stop putting these CMLL guys that I don't even know their names because they all sound the same on this card. Like, I get it was Forbidden Door, but like, let's start making actual characters that people can relate to instead of just showing off the best wrestlers in the world. Sorry.
No, I love that. I'm glad that was a lot of passion there, Jason. But I do agree with you. I think where WWE is clearing AEW right now is the long-term storytelling. And actually, this may be another top rope take. I think adding more pay-per-views for AEW really hurt them in the storytelling department, because when they just had 4 pay-per-views and they had like 2 months to build to each pay-per-view, then you got those longer term stories that can finally culminate at these big 4 pay-per-views. Once they started booking from pay-per-view to pay-per-view, and they really do it in like these blocks versus WWE, where they will take multiple pay-per-views to tell a full story, or premium live events, whatever you want to call it. So I will give AEW a little bit of a pass because it is Forbidden Door. It is like it's just supposed to be this dream card thing for, the sickos, as they would say.
Yeah.
But they really do. I hope from now until All In, which I think they get like maybe 6 to 8 weeks. I forget. I think it's August 25th. So maybe they do get a nice solid 2 months to build from now to All In. I hope they do establish longer term stories, and they also build off the stories that they've already been telling. You still have stuff like going on with Will Ospreay, MJF, that can continue. That's another point too. Like MJF, one of my favorite wrestlers today, but his return, it's been a little weird. I think they've kept him face because they knew they were going to be in Long Island, and that's why they kind of hot-shotted a match with Hechicero, because they had this whole thing with Roosh where there's politics involved where he couldn't be on the card. And they just were like, okay, we'll throw MJF as a babyface in this match with Hechicero, and then hopefully in the next week or two, he does some sort of turn where he's back to old MJF, because MJF really is in his element when he's just dastardly heel, talking his trash, doing his thing. And yeah, it's just, I agree with you on the whole, like, it is just matches for the sake of matches. The CMLL thing was kind of a dud. They brought in like a CMLL invasion in like January, February. And I remember people freaking out like, oh man, we're going to see all these CMLL guys take over AEW. And then it really was nothing.
Yeah.
After like 2 or 3 weeks, like they just kind of stopped. And then they brought him back for Forbidden Door. And I guarantee you, now that Forbidden Door's over, we're not going to see them in a prominent role. Maybe Hechicero, just because he had a big time match with MJF. Other than that, I think all the other CMLL guys are just going to go back to Mexico and do whatever. I would like to see more long-term stories. I do think if there's one thing I can praise AEW for, I do think their women's division has gotten a lot better since Mercedes Moné has debuted. And
I mean, it's not gonna get worse.
It's not going to get worse that way, but they're actually like telling, like, it was bad. Like, if you looked at AEW's women's division from when they debuted to like basically before Mercedes Moné, they were not getting any time. There's no real stories being told. They might tell one good story a year, if that. Like Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa was a nice little feud. Even then, I wasn't super invested in it. At least since Mercedes Moné has come in, now they have Mercedes and Willow. They also have Willow and Chris Statlander. They've also been building this Mariah May, Tony Storm thing. I thought Tony Storm and Minu Shirakawa, I thought that was a nice little story that they told, building up to Forbidden Door. One of the only stories they told going into Forbidden Door.
Quite literally. It was like, literally, I looked at the card and I was like, why are any of these matches happening?
Yeah. So I will give them credit for that. I'm with you, actually. I did want to bring this up because you mentioned being a big fan from AW from the start. It was almost a tradition. I remember doing college radio, and I had a midnight shift on Wednesdays. So it was tradition for me to be like, all right, I'm going to go watch AEW from 8 to 10. And then I'm going to listen to AEW show reviews from like 10 to 11. And then I'm going to walk down to the radio station. And that was kind of like my little Wednesday night there.
Yeah.
And it was exciting because it felt fresh. It felt like there was all these new possibilities. There was new stars being presented to the forefront. but the roster's just become so oversaturated at this point
Yeah.
because there are a lot of great wrestlers, but it doesn't matter how many great wrestlers you have if you don't have enough time to showcase them all on your main show. I get that they have Collision, I get that they have Rampage, but those are also on the weekends.
Yeah.
And I understand SmackDown's on the weekend, but SmackDown also has its own unique roster and
Right.
unique stories that are being told on the show and stories that are intriguing. It's almost the main show for WWE for some people.
Yeah.
Whereas Collision is clearly a second rate show. And that's why I loved Collision when it first started, because there was that little like
Right.
invisible
You thought
brand
it was going to
split
be
where
treated equally.
if
It's not.
you wanted to see CM Punk, if you wanted to see the Bullet Club, if you wanted to see Samoa Joe, then you would go watch on Saturday. But
It
they don't
should be
have
like that.
guys. It should be like that, but they don't also I don't think they have the guys to build a Saturday show around, which is why I think CM Punk has been such a huge loss for them because
But
they
they
really don't.
do. But they do
Well, they
because
do,
that's
but
the
not on the level of like you have to admit, there's no CM Punk that they have on the roster that's
right.
you put on a Saturday and you could sell the show on one guy.
I agree that you're not going to replace CM Punk, but like the one of the biggest criticisms about AW is that they do have such a bloated roster. So it's not like they don't have the bodies; it's that they don't have the stars, and they don't have the stars because they're not giving them TV time. Like you have the bodies, build them up, make them bigger stars. And the other thing is like the report just came out that they're spending over $100 million a year on these talent contracts. And yet, every episode, they're bringing in guys that they're not signed. They're bringing in people from like New Japan and CMLL and off the indies. And that's fine. But like, get us invested in your product. Like when AEW first started, it felt like they just wanted to be WCW. And now it feels like they just want to be New Japan strong. Like they're pushing Jay White and Okada and Will Ospreay, and that's great. I love those guys. They're huge stars and they deserve to be pushed. But like, where are your stars? Where are the people that AEW has pushed? MJF is there. Great.
That's it. That is literally it. MJF is the one guy. That is the one guy where if they gave him a whole show, I think maybe they could get some traction with it. But they just don't have like over the past 5 years of AW existing, the only guy they have to show for is MJF. So I understand why they gave MJF that big contract or why they need to sign him, because if MJF had made the jump to WWE, AEW would be in shambles right
Oh
now.
yeah.
Like it would be tough for them to showcase any like stars that they've built over the past 5 years. Now, to that point, which is going to transition to the point I wanted to talk about, there was the return of another star that they have made over the past 5 years.
Thank God.
Britt Baker is
back.
Thank
God.
And that's another thing with the women's division. I'll let you go. But that is going to help the women's division even more now that they started to tell these stories, and now that they have Britt Baker back, and there's also Jamie Hayter waiting in the wings. I think AEW can get some momentum back by starting to push these women's stars on their main show.
I agree. I think Britt Baker, Mercedes Moné, Tony Storm, those are three off the top of my head that are bona fide stars that you can build a division around, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple other ones underneath that are all right. Like they push Sky Blue a lot.
I do love Willow and Chris Statlander. Of course, I'm a Long Island boy, so gotta rep my Long Island folk. But those two are definitely stars that you can use. Mercedes, Tony, and Britt Baker. Use those three to build up stars like Willow and Chris, so that they could be on the same level as them. And now all of a sudden, you got 5 women who you can build a division around. And on top of that, you still have Thunder Rosa out there, Jamie Hayter, and you mentioned Sky Blue as well.
There's one other girl I need to talk about here. I don't know what is going on with her medically or politically backstage or whatever, but can we talk about how far they have just like dropped Saraya? Like,
oh yeah,
she is a freaking star. Like they made her win the women's world title at Wembley last year in her hometown. Nice pop. And then they did literally nothing. Has she wrestled in the last year? I don't even know.
She was on 0 Hour, just to show you.
Like she's a huge star. Why is she being treated like nobody? I don't get that, because I've been a huge fan of her since she started in WWE. She's different. She looks different than everybody else. She's a great wrestler. She's a veteran. People know who she is just by looking at her. Even if they don't know her by Saraya, if they know her by Paige. Like, She has an aura that a lot of these other women don't, and the fact that she's being left on the sidelines is erroneous to me.
Well, I could tell you why. It's because, I mean, if there's a problem with AEW, it's that they're chronically on the internet. And I don't know if you've been paying attention to the internet discourse on Soraya, but her boyfriend has made some pretty problematic comments about trans people. And I think, and she's gone out right and defended her boyfriend from these transphobic comments,
Yeah.
which I think is playing a part into her not getting as big of a role. And whatever you feel about it, however you feel about,
Yeah.
why the reasons
But
given, we won't get
yeah.
into it. But so you're right. Soraya is a star, and you got All In coming up. I do think she has to play a part in that card in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I understand why maybe she's being left off the card, but you're right. It is another star that they have that they're just underutilizing. And if she decides to leave or they happen to let her go, she's going to get a huge like ovation if
Yeah.
she decides to return to WWE.
Yeah.
So it's really like a lose-lose for them right now with Soraya, because you put her on TV, you're going to have people complaining that you're putting this transphobic girl on TV. If you lose her, she's just going to go to WWE, where they don't, I mean, WWE fans, they're just going to be happy to see Paige back in WWE.
Yeah.
And then it's going to make it AEW look terrible, because now that's going to be another AEW star who went to WWE and got over tenfold.
Yep, I completely agree. All right, this is getting long, so let's wrap this up real quick. Let's just do like one line about some of these big moments from other big moments from Forbidden Door. Jack Perry won the ladder match to win the vacant TNT title. I like Jack. I think the whole CM Punk situation is the best thing that's happened in his career. He looks more confident. He feels like a legitimate star now. So I think this was the right move for him, and I'm excited to see where his character goes from here.
Yeah, I think between that and I'll also include the Elite versus Hiroshi Tanahashi and the Acclaimed in this discussion.
Yeah.
It just feels like the CM Punk thing it has helped them with getting some heat, but it seems like it's still like the main focus. Like when you're in the middle of this Elite match and you hear CM Punk chants and then
Yeah.
FCM Punk chants, it's like, yeah, it's getting a reaction, but it's still centered around CM Punk, who isn't in the company right now.
Yeah, the guy in WWE is your biggest star in AEW.
Right. So, like, I don't know how helpful the Brawl In footage was showing all that.
Horrible idea.
It was really, I mean, it was entertaining for me to watch, honestly. Like, as a fan, I was like, oh, this is cool. But
yeah.
It really did not do anyone any favors. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, but it's great heat for the Elite. I just think it's another way to bring up CM Punk and just show how much of an asset he was to AEW before leaving.
The only last thing I want to say about this is they have Okada as a heel with the Elite, which is fine. He's funny. Okada's getting the biggest baby face pops of anybody on your roster right now, and he's your heel. Come on now.
I do get tickled by some of the stuff Okada does. Like when the Acclaimed came out that one night on Dynamite and they got their mics cut off and they cut to Okada. Yeah. I pressed the wrong button. I'm so sorry.
Right. He's a great wrestler. He's funny. He can do
He's hilarious. He is hilarious. I do think it's going to be one of those things where eventually it's going to make him a babyface. But that's another problem I have with AEW is that when they have a heel who's starting to get babyface reactions, I think Tony's too quick to turn them into a babyface. Yeah. It happened with Samoa Joe. It happened with Swerve Strickland. Like, I think at some points, even if you are getting that like babyface reaction, like you kind of just need to stick with your guns and just, exactly. And that's another great example.
The fact that MJF is your top babyface and Okada's like your top heel is just whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so that happened. We already kind of talked about this. Tony Storm defeated Mina Shirakawa. It was a fine. It's the only story on the show. Mercedes Moné defeated Stephanie Vacour.
I want to speak on this. Hold on. Okay, I really need to speak on this. This was the funniest thing to happen on the whole Forbidden Door card.
All right.
So Mercedes Moné comes out, right? And she gets a wonderful reaction because she's a star. Obviously, you get the CEO chance, whatever. Stephanie Vacour, I mean, this is her first major American pay-per-view appearance. So people, again, they were polite to her, but she did not get the same reaction as Mercedes Moné coming out. In the middle of the match, one guy in a Boston Celtics jersey or a shirt. It was a green shirt. He just starts antagonizing this Long Island crowd. Now, I'm a New Yorker. You're a
Yeah,
Philly guy. If there's one thing we can come together on, it's we hate Boston.
that's
We do
right.
not like Boston at all. So this guy knew exactly what he was doing. And of course, the connection with Mercedes Bonet being from
Yeah.
Boston, this whole crowd just turned on Mercedes Bonet. And it wasn't even her fault. It was this
Yeah.
guy in the Celtics shirt just antagonizing the whole Long Island crowd to the point where they're chanting F the Celtics,
Yeah.
F the Red Sox.
That's
Stephanie
awesome.
Vaquer gets offense. You would have thought she was 2019 Becky Lynch. Like she was going, like the pop she was getting for all of her
Yeah.
moves was crazy. And I just thought it was so entertaining. And people were discussing like, are people sick of Mercedes Monet? Or is she
Mm.
not going to get the reaction? I do think Mercedes is better as a heel than a face, but I think this was like, this was just
Yeah.
like a rare scenario where we kind of visited Bizarro World, and it was all thanks to this one guy in a Celtics shirt who just decided I'm going to piss off this whole Long Island crowd.
I love that.
Very
Uh,
entertaining.
I love that. All right, real quick. Samoa Joe, Hook, and Katsuyori Shibata defeated the Learning Tree. I actually really like Jericho in this role. I know people hate it. I think it's hilarious. I actually really enjoy it. So I like that.
I saw a lot of footage online of people like they were taking video of like the crowd during this match, and people were actively walking out because again,
Yeah.
this is a 14 match card. So if you're gonna pick a bathroom break,
Right,
it's gonna be
it
this
is.
match.
It is.
So like half the crowd was gone for this match.
This could have been a TV match.
100%.
Naito defeated John Moxley for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. Big win for the New Japan guy on the Forbidden Door show. That's fine. Moxley doesn't need that title anyway. I didn't really have any thoughts on that. Naito's great. It's fine.
That is great, but New Japan does need to start building up some new
Yes.
stars. Like they've had the same stars for the past 5 years.
Well, their stars are in AEW right now.
Exactly. So. All the stars that they have are in AEW, and then the stars that they do have still on New Japan are old. Like they don't move. Naito doesn't move the same. Tanahashi doesn't move the same. They need to start like building up a new crop of New Japan talent for just maybe kind of get that buzz similar to how they got in 2016, 2018 New Japan, where it was like their golden era. They need to have the next era of New Japan stars built up so that Forbidden Door can seem like a bigger deal rather than just AEW guys facing older New Japan stars.
Zack Sabre Jr. defeats Orange Cassidy. I was actually surprised to see Zack win, and I was happy for it because he's lost like the last three big matches he's had. Zack Sabre Jr. has been one of my favorite wrestlers for a long, long time. I'm happy to see he got his big win here. I hope it means he's getting a push towards Wembley because I love Zack.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a great win for Zack Sabre Jr. I assure you, he will be a part of that Wembley card. It just makes sense. And I do love the chemistry him and Orange Cassidy have in the ring. I do think it's a great dichotomy of like the really, proficient technical wrestler versus the guy who, is just kind of, he likes putting his hand in his pocket.
Yeah. I didn't realize they were like as close as they were like personally, like outside of the ring, which was nice.
And I remember, I really do love that Forbidden Door match they had last year. It was like the Fatal 4-Way with Orange Cassidy and Sabre Jr. and Shibata, and I think Daniel Garcia was involved. That was an entertaining 4-way, and they kind of did play off of that in this match. This was actually one of my more enjoyable matches on the card. I really enjoyed this match.
I'm a big Zack Sabre Jr. guy, so I'll watch him and Ospreay do anything. We already talked about the world title match. Great match, but Swerve retained with no real story following other than Daniel Garcia's waiting for Ospreay. And then the last match is Bryan Danielson defeated Shingo to advance in the Owen Hart Cup tournament. I assume Danielson's your front runner to win that tournament, right? Main event Wembley.
It really depends on who the wild card is tomorrow.
Oh, true.
For Dynamite, I think if the wild card isn't anyone like super out there, then I think Danielson is the front runner. My prediction is that Hangman is the wild card and he's going to make a run. It's going to be Hangman Danielson in the finals.
I like that.
And then Hangman wins, goes on to face Swerve at Wembley because they have the history. And that's another one where, again, you want to build stories in AEW.
Yes.
Swerve and Hangman, they've been having a feud for like over a year and they can continue off of that. They even played the footage of Swerve invading Hangman's house and talking to his child in the crib. Yeah. So I think it's all set up there for Hangman to come in as the wild card and win the tournament and face Swerve.
I love it. I hope that happens because he's another one of those big stars that the company is definitely missing.
Mm.
And that's Forbidden Door. They're now on the road to
Real
All In.
quick,
Oh yeah,
since
what's
we
up?
mentioned the Owen Hart tournament,
Yeah,
who's your prediction for the women's side? Do you have any early thoughts on that
I
one?
don't even know, dude, who's like in the freaking tournament. Um, well, let's see. So who's the champion right now? It's Tony Storm.
Yeah, I think
So
it's pretty obvious that it's got to be Mariah May, right? Winning this whole thing, and then you get Tony and
yeah,
Mariah at Wembley.
yeah.
I could also see Willow going back to back, but I
She's
think the
got a
story
she's
is,
got beef with Mercedes.
yeah, I could see Mercedes costing Willow at some point in this
But Britt
tournament.
Baker's back now.
Britt Baker's back now, but I
That's Wembley,
maybe
right?
she.
That's Wembley.
You
Britt
think
and
so?
Mercedes
Mercedes and Britt.
for the TBS title. Yeah,
I would
and
think
then,
so, but there's this tradition going on in Fatal Four Ways and all in that Tony Khan loves.
yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if I saw Mercedes, Britt, Chris, and Willow in a 4-way.
No, you got to do Mercedes and Britt one on one.
I know you do. It's more of like a meme at this point. That
Yeah,
because they were supposed to do a big singles match at Wembley last year, but Tony Khan was like, "We love our Fatal Four Ways at All In.
mm,
There's a tradition of one other show having a Fatal Four Way."
yeah,
So who knows if they decide to keep that tradition? I could see it going there, but I do think the money match is Mercedes Moné versus Britt Baker.
yeah. I'd have to look at this card for the women's side on the Owen Cup tournament. I know that the winner faces Tony Storm or the champion at All In Wembley. Dude, I don't know. I mean, I guess Mariah May makes the most sense, but again, like, who's Mariah May? She's fine. I don't know. I'm not into it. I'd rather see Saraya, justice for Saraya.
All right.
All righty. Well, that was a lot for our first episode. But that's what happens when you get two hardcore wrestling fans talking shop. And you be going an hour and a half. So, all right, Will. Any last thoughts? And if not, where can we find you?
You could follow me on Instagram at willie.thrill. That's Willie with an IE .thrill. You can also find me on Twitter at Thrilly Vanilli. That's with a Y at the end, Thrilly
Cool.
Vanilli. Yeah, I'm excited about this podcast moving forward. We're going to have a lot of great content coming up, not just the podcast, but other videos coming up in the future. So stay tuned for that. And yeah.
Yep. And you can find me at Jace, JASBMARCUS, Jace B. Marcus on Twitter. Like Will said, podcasts, interviews, more, all different types of content, whatever you guys want to see. So let us know in the comments below. And yeah, we'll hopefully be getting to this every week. So, Will, great first episode. We had a lot to talk about. I think we hit it out of the park, and I'm excited.
Me too, brother. Me too.
All righty. So stay tuned, and we'll have more content for you next week. More top rope takes. From now, take care, everybody, and goodbye.